This is definitely one of those products that's a bit hard to review. I don't want to be just another voice, regurgitating technical information to you. That's not what I generally do on this channel. But the interesting thing about this room correction software is that IK has made an analog hardware box that takes all of that out of your computer and puts it between your outputs and your speakers, so you can kind of just set it and forget it. So, I can walk you through what it did to my room and what I'm hearing in my room and what I think, but at the end of the day, that's very subjective and it's very dependent on what it's doing in my specific room. So my opinions on what I'm hearing and what it's actually doing in my room aren't necessarily going to translate to your situation. So I don't think that's going to be very helpful. But what I do think is going to be helpful is for me walking you through my setup a little bit and showing you why this is going to make my life so much easier, being able to have a hardware box that's doing this outside of the computer, because I have a bit of a complicated hybrid setup here. I think a lot of people are struggling to really comprehend, why do I need this in a hardware box when I can just run the software? And I would say for a lot of people, maybe just running a plugin in the background works great for you. I use Sonarworks right now, and I don't really have any complaints about it from a sound standpoint. It's doing a good job, but workflow-wise, it really, really complicates things and makes some processes pretty much impossible to hear the room correction during bigger tracking sessions, and I'll show you why. So let me just walk you through my setup, and hopefully at the end of that, maybe some of it will click, because again, some people, I don't think you're going to actually need a hardware box, but for a lot of you that are thinking about getting into some sort of room correction that haven't dived into it yet and might have a similar setup, I think you're going to realize that there's a lot of things to get around that you might not be thinking of. So again, this product potentially is going to make a lot of people's lives much easier. So let me walk you through my setup. So let me walk you through my setup here, because again, it's a bit of a complicated hybrid workflow. And when you throw most room EQ correction programs into the equation, it makes life very difficult. It's taken me a while to get used to this. So let me walk you through my setup as is right now before we even get into the Arc Studio setup. I use Sonarworks right now. My intention is not to throw Sonarworks under the bus in any way in any of this. It's just, this is the nature of most software-based room corrections and some of the hurdles you're going to have to get around if you have a setup like mine. So here's my screen, here's Sonarworks. So right now there's two ways to run Sonarworks. You have the software that can run in the background on your OS, and that's usually what I have up when I'm like watching YouTube or listening to Spotify or something like that. Anything coming off my computer that I want to hear room correction, I have to have the Sonarworks app running in the background. Now, when I run Pro Tools or any DAW, I also have to have Sonarworks on my master bus if I want to hear any of that stuff. So there's two things going on right now. We have two versions of Sonarworks running, not at the same time, but kind of in tandem. If I want to hear stuff off my computer, I have to actually listen to it via this Sonarworks app up here for any computer-based stuff. When I'm in my DAW, I have to have the Sonarworks plugin running on what I want to hear the room correction software. Now, in theory, that's not a huge deal. That's not a big deal. But here's where things get complicated for me. I'm running two consoles in this setup. I have my analog API console right here, and because I run a Universal Apollo system, I also have the Apollo console running in the background. Now, during big tracking sessions, what I have to do when we're monitoring is that I have sends that I physically send to the players out there so they can hear themselves. If we're doing any sort of overdubs where they need to hear back from the DAW, in Pro Tools, I have my master fader over here going to a virtual channel on the Apollo console. So anything going through Pro Tools, and I've got my lapel mic going through Pro Tools right now. Anything going through Pro Tools to go back to the musicians is being monitored through Virtual 1 and 2. So this is a problem for a few reasons. Number one, anytime that I want to hear room correction during an overdub process, I actually have to go back into Pro Tools and I physically have to bypass the Sonarworks plugin up here, because anything coming through that master fader going back to them for overdubs, they can't hear the speaker room correction through their headphones. It's going to sound wonky. So during bigger sessions where we're doing overdubs, I've just gotten to the point where I've pretty much turned room correction off. Now, when I'm setting levels and setting mics, it's important for me to hear all of that coming through my speakers with the room correction. It's important to me. It helps me get better results. So before we even start recording, when I'm setting mics and I need to hear stuff, I'm constantly going back and forth and turning room correction on and off inside of Pro Tools just to be able to hear the mics with room correction, and then turning it off. All that to say, I hope you're starting to realize how complicated just having room correction makes my life in a hybrid setup. It gets even more difficult because a lot of times inside the Apollo console, when we're doing bigger tracking sessions, I can either send individual channels from Pro Tools out to individual faders, so I have faders laid out in front of me during tracking sessions just to organize things better. I can route those out via Pro Tools, or I can physically route those out via the faders on the virtual Apollo console. So, I mean, again, all that to say, during big tracking sessions, it would be really nice to just have room correction going all the time and have it set up to where I'm the only person hearing it, and I'm not having to go back and forth and wonder, hey, did I bypass room correction for the musicians? And I'll be totally honest, I screw up constantly, and I've had this set up for a while. I'll have musicians catch me all the time. We'll go in to do another take, and they're like, hey, stop, something sounds wrong. I'm like, damn it, yeah, sorry guys. Forgot to bypass that. So it's a very frustrating process, especially in a complicated hybrid setup. Now, in comes Arc 4. Now, instead of running that, all you have to do is pull up a very familiar looking plugin, and then you just tell it, hey, store it into the hardware. It all goes into the hardware box, and the hardware box is placed on the output of my console because the monitor output is on my console now. That goes out of my console into the Arc Studio box and then into my speakers. So and once I store, I can just close the program. Well, let's say my corrections are not saved. That's fine. So now I've got all my presets shot to that box. I can close the program. It's like that software doesn't exist, and I can go about my day. If I want to monitor things straight off the console and not worry about anything digital, I'm hearing my room correction straight off the console. If I want to go back and hear everything through the DAW, whether it be outside of that, where I'm, watching YouTube or listening to Spotify, it's all there. My DAW stuff, I don't have to worry about any of my routing or anything. It's in the background doing its thing. I never have to think about it again. That's huge for me. And again, I think there's probably a lot of people that aren't really getting their head around, why do I need a hardware box? Maybe you don't, but if you're thinking about getting into room correction and you haven't yet, and you have a setup anywhere closely remotely to how I have my hybrid workflow set up, I'm telling you, it's going to be a huge, huge pain in the butt. Having it all shot out to a hardware box where you can set it and forget it is really big. I know some people have had concerns about the transparency of the physical Arc hardware box, so I think I found a way that we can take a look at that. So I want to say one thing before we get into the technical nitty-gritty. I sat there without any room correction going on in the hardware box and physically plugged it in and unplugged it a few times, just listening through my speakers. I couldn't hear a difference with it being in and out. So just most of the time, that's enough for me. I trust my ears at this point, especially for things like this where I know clients aren't going to ever hear the difference between that box being in and out from a technical standpoint. This isn't something that I'm actually passing audio through or I need to worry about any weird conversion things happening. This is just using my ears. So I can't hear a difference with the box in or out of the signal chain. It sounds clean to me, but we're going to do a test because this is what the masses require. Feed the beast. All right, let's feed you some stuff. So I've done a phase test. What I've done is I've recorded a chunk of white noise, and it's important that if you do this, you actually record the white noise so that you're passing the same white noise processing over and over again, as opposed to the white noise just starting and stopping at random points. So I've recorded a chunk of white noise and fed that same thing through every time. I've gone out of my converters and back into my converters without the arc in there at all. So I recorded a clean pass of my ADDA process. And then I also recorded a pass with the arc hardware box in there so that we're actually recording the white noise through the arc hardware with no EQ going on. And we're going to do a phase test. So if we're looking at this scientifically, we need our baseline. So as my baseline, I recorded the clean pass without the arc in the equation. I recorded a clean pass twice with the same white noise. You're not going to hear it. You're just going to see it. Pay attention to this master fader in Pro Tools. So this is just a clean pass of the white noise passing through. I did a second pass of that clean white noise, and I've put that out of phase. So if we play this second one with the first one out of phase, watch the master meter. They should cancel out completely. Boom. Cool. So just as a baseline, we know that the way we're doing the test is correct. They canceled out. Now, I also did the same thing with the ARC hardware in the signal chain. I recorded that twice as well. So if we do the same thing, there's the ARC first pass. Here's the second pass out of phase. When I unmute it, it should cancel out completely. Cool. Boom. Canceling out completely. So just as a baseline for this test from a scientific standpoint, we have determined that I've done the test correctly. This is the right way to do it. Now, here's the juicy part. We're going to take one pass from the ARC and one pass of the clean ADDA, and in a perfect world, they should phase out completely. Oh, so close. So again, we've done a pass of my ADDA just clean without the ARC hardware in the signal chain. And we've also done a pass where the ARC is in there and that white noise has passed through it. One is in phase, one is out of phase. So in a perfect world, they would cancel out completely, but they're not. I'm not the person to tell you why this is not canceling out perfectly. I was really, really hoping that they would cancel out completely and we could just put this to rest and never have this discussion again. I might have just opened up a whole nother can of worms, but I like to be transparent. So again, my takeaway from this, for my use, I trust my ears. I could not hear a damn difference between the hardware being in and out. So I'm happy. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm never going to think about it again. But if you don't trust your ears as much and you want to be more technical about this, which I don't think you're wrong. We might disagree on this. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But there you go. You have the information you need. If that's going to deter you from buying this box, then you can spend $6,000 on a Trinov system and do this test yourself. A lot of us don't have that kind of money for room correction. So your choice. Again, I can't hear a difference. I'm not going to worry about it, but I think it was important to do this test so that people, could know that, okay, well, the arc isn't 100% completely clean. Do with that what you may, but I'm never going to think about it again. Wrapping up the video here, I thought we'd have a little bit of a laugh at my expense. Transparency is always fun, but if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that things look a little bit different. This week, I completely flipped my control room around. The console used to be centered behind me. I have flipped everything around to the other end. I have some huge overhead gobos that I need to still move over here, but the acoustics on this side of the room are just very different. There's been some pretty big issues. So let me show you what ARC calculated in my room. Look at that 12 dB bump around 80 or 90 hertz. Holy crap. That is brutal. I spent years tweaking and fixing this room. I know it probably seems like there's not much going on here, but man, I had it pretty damn flat, and now I've just flipped it around. I've screwed everything up. Now, that looks brutal, but I've got to say, after I shut out the room with ARC and I did its room correction, I mean, it's showing that it's pretty flat. And I'll say, at the very least, I've only had this set up for a few days now, but things sound familiar to me, and they sound right, so that's encouraging. Obviously, I don't think that you should treat room correction as a Band-Aid for major problems. If you're getting readouts like this, I would say, my opinion is, you need to fix some issues in your room, and I'm definitely going to take that to heart and do it as well. I'm not going to fix this issue until I get my new speakers in here. Keeping the barefoots, but I'm going to add a pair of subwoofers that are made specifically for the MM45s. So I'm going to wait until those get in here. I'm probably selling the console this year. It's a whole nother discussion, but I also want to wait until I get that out of the space to see if that has any bearing on the acoustics. But I'm in a transitional period right now. ARC seems to have tried to fix those issues at least. And I will say that things sound very familiar over here after doing the ARC correction. So that's encouraging. Things sound right. There's a little bit, I mean, I can definitely hear that there's something wonky going on there. It's different. I can learn to work around it. ARC's doing a great job because that's a pretty big, significant issue. But I'm feeling pretty good. Things sound familiar. I feel comfortable moving forward for the next few months until I can fix that. But again, I would encourage anyone that's looking at room software, whatever it is, don't treat it as a Band-Aid. You know, that's an issue I need to fix in my room. I will. But I have been really happy with the ARC software so far. Again, the workflow change is so significant. It's huge. It's going to make my life so much easier. And I'm so happy to integrate this into my setup and just not have to think about it anymore. Basically just shoot stuff to the hardware box, out of sight, out of mind. So yeah, that's ARC 4. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.